Welcome to Among the Workers, a Marxist media presentation brought to you by the Indiana CPUSA, where we have a people's conversation on current events and Marxist theory.
So for this week, it is Lynching, a Weapon of National Oppression by Harry Haywood and Milton Howard. I find this pamphlet extremely interesting, not only because it's directly related to our recent struggle regarding Black Lives Matter and several incidents of lynching happening around the United States. Also, I found it very valuable because the authors very directly stated the kind of intersection between the racial struggle and class struggle, and how different rhetorics try to distort that. So the pamphlet kind of divides the topic into 5 subtopics. One is that lynching is the counter-revolutionary reaction of the ruling class towards the struggle of Black workers. And 2 is the reason behind lynching is to instigate fear in Black workers so the ruling class can keep exploiting them. And also, like side notes, also some of the race leaders, which are sort of also belonging to the elite class, they nurture the kind of white trash mob rhetoric, which hides the class root of lynching and kind of just distort that into a uneducated white people versus Black people kind of struggle, and just hides the class element of this conflict. And then a rape lie tactic as a way to mobilize poor white people to support and participate in the persecution of Black workers. 4th is that the state and federal government, law, courthouses are all enabling the lynching and other persecution, which basically ties back to the topic that lynching is a national weapon, not just spontaneous actions. Then finally, to fight against lynching, unity of workers of all races is needed. And with a few very great examples of international solidarity and also interracial solidarities. So very nice read. And I will hand over the mic to Jason now.
Thank you, comrade. So I came across this because, for some reason, I'm friends with Gwendolyn Midlow Hall on Facebook, and she had posted something on there about her son. It just got me, kind of curious about Harry Haywood at that point. And so I started looking him up in some of his writings, and this is the one I came across, and I started reading it and did a little bit of research on Harry Haywood too. He was a member of both the CPUSA and the CPSU. So I thought that was really fascinating. But anyway, Emily touched on some really good points in this, and what stood out to me is sort of how lynchings defend profits. And what Harry Haywood does, he crafts this in a way that puts it in really good historical context and goes to the heart of the matter of African Americans as a super exploited class, almost like a separate nationality within the United States. And in a way, sort of being brought over as slaves against their will. They're sort of, an occupied population outside of their own home countries. And that puts them in a unique and vulnerable position to be sort of, one, looked at as the other or as different. And it sort of provides the ruling class a way of driving a wedge between white workers and Black workers. And in a way, they are, in some of the ways in which they're exploited, sort of, is revealed through the state's action, or the state's action in support of quote unquote unruly mobs, when these so-called random, as the capitalist class would have us believe, acts of lynching and extrajudicial killing happen. Sort of as a way for the ruling class and the governmental or the state actors to maintain some sort of on its face appearance of not having anything to do with it, when in fact they they totally do. And that's supported through the media not reporting those kind of actions by local, state, and federal state actors, as evidenced by police departments and National Guard units. So in essence, and what he's getting to here is lynching is defended by the government. And the use of describing the perpetrators as unruly mobs is deceiving. The whole system of profit is based on, robbing workers of their labor value. And so white workers, as we know, we're robbed continuously of our time and our effort, but African Americans are robbed at a greater and more ruthless way, and that is sort of justified by the way that the capitalist propaganda portrays them as the other, and that comes out in the form of being called rapists. So that term, comes out around 1830, according to Haywood. 200 years after, this population of folks were brought over against their will, suddenly now they're rapists. And then that gets translated over time. And as recently as a few days ago, Trump is calling them looters or thugs, and they're criminalized. And they've been criminalized since, since the time that the end of slavery and the end of the Civil War, as a way to continue slavery by putting them in prison, and through the 13th Amendment, continuing to not pay them what they earn for their wages, and again, putting them in that category of super exploitation. So they're an isolated, oppressed nationality. It's kind of what Haywood is going here, or is doing here, or sort of bringing that out. And that's a necessary component of a capitalist economic system, because otherwise the ruling elite, the capitalist class, cannot maintain their hold on power without driving a wedge between workers and preventing class solidarity through whatever means is possible. And here it's using race to do that. I'm trying to think if there were other points I wanted to make. So to relate that to current times, what we're seeing right now is, again, a criminalization of peaceful protesters in the streets, the FBI identifying BLM as a terrorist organization, Antifa as well, in order to sort of pave the way for even further repression and to maintain that super exploitation and to continue to drive a wedge between white workers and African American workers. And I think it's interesting that he uses, or sort of looks at, the situation of Black Americans as being an isolated, oppressed nationality, because you're also seeing that in how state actors treat them, and they treat and behave as though they are an occupying force to quell insurrection from this particular nationality. And that's what we're seeing. And I think right now, after the murder of George Floyd, it's brought that out much more clearly. And we're seeing it, and a lot of folks are seeing it in a way that they haven't seen it before. And that lie, or that use of that particular type of propaganda, it's still working on a lot of white workers, but it's not working as well as it has been. So there's a lot of room for hope there. So that's what I've got. What I'm ready for, or willing to open up for discussion.
Ken, I just wanted to mention that I thought it was an excellent essay, and one of the things that struck me is that it's also a classic. Like you can learn a lot just from looking at the way he makes his argument. And he really uses the reality of the experience of the Black community to highlight the systemic nature of racism, that it's not just people, that it's both legal and extra-legal oppression. So it shows it shows that the state is partisan, not neutral. And it really shows the link between exploitation and oppression, and particularly the super oppression of the Black community. One of the things I wanted to just mention was that this was written in 1932, which was before the mass migration, or at the beginnings of the mass migration of Black people from the South to the North. And that national, the view of the Black community as a nation with its own land was very prevalent at that time. And while the national oppression still goes on, we're not advocating for Black folks to be given a nation or be sent back to Africa. What we're advocating for, as I understand it, what I'm advocating for sure, is for the systemic ended, the oppression ended, to be able to innovate United States.
Peter, can I say something?
Sure.
I would say that with oppression and specifically the lynching strategy, it was used all the way from the end of the Civil War up until today to drive a wedge between the white working class and the Black working class. And we see that originally with lynching in the 1860s and 70s to prevent a coming together of the industrial North and the agricultural South and the exploitation of workers. And then, of course, as you move deeper into the 20th century, it was always finding a new scapegoat to divide the working class and get them to fight with each other. Then it became, Irish Catholics, Chinese immigrants, and they'll always find a new scapegoat to get the working class fighting against that scapegoat and against each other, so that they don't identify and come to class consciousness on a class basis, rather on a racial or identity basis, which keeps them fighting amongst themselves.
Emily, I agree with Peter's analysis. And to add on that, I was interested in the kind of rape rhetoric, because incidentally, the rape rhetoric has not only been used against Black people, they have been used against Chinese people as well. And basically every other ethnic minorities. The kind of rapist or the kind of a protect white womanhood kind of rhetoric has been used even in like movies and media and all sorts of things. It has been pretty prevalent. And so in that, you can not only see a facet of race conflict, but also kind of like sexist and xenophobia and that kind of lens. So really, the kind of trying to drive a wedge between the different subsections within the working class people, and then just make sure that they don't form form class consciousness and just be hostile to each other. That has been like a tried and true method for more than 100 years.
Well, I was just going to basically parallels what already has been said, but even labor radicals, no matter what ethnic group they belong to, have been lynched in the past as well. I mean, if you were a member of IWW in the late 19th century and early 20th century, you faced the same kind of rhetoric, the same kind of epithets, the same kind of violence that minorities often face too. So it's interesting that they would, I guess, I think you see quite clearly that this is a repression used to keep the classes from coming together. Even white folks were lynched for trying to change the world, and then of course black folks were lynched for their own concerns and trying to bring all this together. So, but it's funny how even radical workers would oftentimes be repressed in a similar type of way. That's all I was trying to say.
I'd like to say a few things. First, the pamphlet itself. In 1932, the official position of the Communist Party, following the lead of the International Communist Movement, was that the solution to the oppression of African Americans was for an independent country in the Black Belt, which is the Deep South, the most fertile area of the Deep South. That position, which Haywood was very much identified with, was later changed. And now the position, I would say the best expression of what to do to deal with the special oppression of African Americans is fighting for democratic rights of African Americans. But all of that, I think, needs to be pulled together in a different way. The key to it, of course, is that it's a ruling class tactic to keep the working class divided. That's absolutely true. And it has been used against different ethnic minorities, but nothing compares to the way it has been used against African Americans. And the reason is African Americans are a large, integrated part of the working class. And keeping black and white workers separate is the key to ruling class survival. I mean, it's true that we had the Chinese Exclusion Act, for instance, which made it illegal for Chinese people to come here. And in big cities are anti-Italian and anti-Irish, and lately anti-Middle Eastern, etc. But none of them are on the same level of the oppression of African Americans, because of what's at stake for the ruling class. It's been a long time since I've read that pamphlet, so I don't really remember what he advocates in terms of how to deal with the problem. But the analysis remains sound, in my opinion. And it's interesting because in the last 6 months, we have seen a decisive shift in the ruling class's ability to keep white workers focused on African Americans. Support for Black Lives Matter 3 months ago, 4 months ago, last year was like at 30%. And now the polls show that the recognition of systemic racism and the issues raised by Black Lives Matter have the support of about 70%. And a majority of white people. That is a fundamental shift that has happened because of everything we've seen in the last 6 months. So I think we need to discuss these issues more concretely. But the one thing that we have to take away from it is that uniting black and white workers against the ruling class is the key to any progress. And keeping that unity from being developed is the bedrock policy of the ruling class.
I just want to say there's this 5-part documentary called Plutocracy by Scott Noble. And he pretty much goes from like the dawn of the United States all the way to modern issues with class struggle. There's a section where he talks about racism not being an issue at parts of the, in different parts of history, where, workers are trying to unionize, whether they work for the, railroad system or the mining companies or whatever. And I think that's a huge part of history that's just like wiped out in our culture, in any level of education we have. Like you have to search for that kind of information to find it. With that said, like the fact that lynchings are they're kind of becoming popular right now is scary. It's like horrifying to me that, a few different states have already had lynchings. So I think this needs to be addressed like really quickly, in terms of, workers uniting. I don't know. I mean, it's just a scary time in our country's history anyway. But I think this book, this piece is really valuable today.
The biggest thing that we're fighting right now here is trying to stop this guilt kind of formation, among some people, and forming groups based on that. And we don't even like the word ally. We like the word solidarity and comradeship, and the line of the alliance is black-led and left-led, and I think that shows the seriousness that we give to the problem of racism. And so that's basically it. But yes, lynching has always been, I mean, even before this upsurge and before Black Lives Matter, if they wanted to scare somebody, they'd like put a noose in somebody's locker or something in a school, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's part of the general ruling class armory against us.
Okay, Jason, did you want to have some wrap-up words from your perspective?
I think this is, I'm familiar with Harry Haywood's complete history of the party. I knew there were some things that happened. Don't know the full story. It doesn't matter. But I thought this particular pamphlet, this is something that we put out as a party, and I think it was an important work, even it's still relevant now from 1932, because nothing has fundamentally changed since then. And lynching, is, we saw it nationally broadcast on TV with George Floyd, and it really sparked a movement. And so, to go to Rob's point, I think that, we're at a point where we have a lot of opportunity to make these connections and really work as communists in this movement.
Thanks. Emily, did you want to close this out?
Sure, yeah. I think this is a very good first educational, and Jason did a good job. And thanks, Jason, for suggesting such a good topic. And next time, Eric suggested a topic which is Unity of the Working Class Against Fascism by Georgy Dimitrov. So yeah, everyone feel free to suggest topics, or if you come across any interesting reads that you want to share, feel free to contact me. Thank you.
So thank you everybody for that.
Thank you for watching Among the Workers, a media presentation brought to you by the Indiana CPUSA. If you like what you saw, please check out our other videos on YouTube, or you can find us at the Indiana District CPUSA on Facebook, or you can look us up at indianacpusa.org, or at the national level, please check out cpusa.org. Thank you.